Welcome to Your Asian Besties, a podcast where we reflect on our life experiences and what's helping us along the way. I'm Leah.
I'm Ray.
And I'm Marin.
Each episode, we talk about a topic unscripted and unfiltered. Today, we'll be talking about reflections on season 1, so the final episode of this first season. We're going to dig into whether we thought we'd get here, how we're feeling, and really excited to talk about this topic with you all. So, I don't know if you both had a chance to listen back to our first episode. I listened to it a while ago, and we sounded so cute and naive. Just kidding. But but there was definitely a lot of like, and I think, since the episodes, we've definitely progressed there. So I was curious for you both. Were there any favorite moments you've had from your Asian Besties journey so far? Marin, you want to go first?
I know it's hard to think of just one. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was like the penis thing. Which I can say it now. Yes! So we've accomplished our goal for season 1. I can say it, and I feel like Ray has had some really funny sound bites.
Yes.
We should probably put together a compilation or something.
Oh, we should. Oh, that'll be so fun.
Yeah, I think it was from that same episode when she was like, the vagina can take a good pounding.
I forgot about
it's
that.
Just the way that she worded things, or like the time she was like, "Oh yeah, I think I bleached my upper lip hair so much that she scared it from being black."
I'd say the beauty episode was full of gems.
Yeah, but I think overall, I like that we were able to laugh. Like sometimes the topics were, more heavy, and and Ray's having a hot flash.
It's got really embarrassing and really warm.
No, it's great. I mean, those are that's my highlight. So,
oh my gosh, yes, I love it. How about you, Ray?
I feel like. So I'm really glad you started off with like the lighthearted, funnier bits, because when Leah asked the question, I feel like I really loved our joy episode because I feel like that was, I don't know why, but it feels like the first time that we really felt unfiltered. I think previously, it is unfiltered, like our podcast. We don't really know what we're going to say, but we kind of have a general idea of theme and like what kind of questions we want to ask each other. But the joy episode, it just kind of felt like a conversation that we would have like in a living room while we're drinking tea, and just like, chilling, rather than like doing this activity that is being shared with the world. And so I feel like that one, I think, really came to my conscience, I think, when she asked that question. And then I think another moment that I really felt very cathartic for me was the bullying episode, because I feel like that's the first time I actually told my friends about what had happened to me. I talked about it extensively with my therapists over the past 10 years, but it's the first time that I had myself, I felt like really heard, because, I pay my therapists to listen to me, but, I don't pay you guys to be my friends. And so that felt very it felt authentic and genuine, and that you really cared about me. And I think, and it was really I listened to the episode several times actually, just to hear Marin say these really affirming things, and just say, that must have been really hard. And kind of just vouch for me, and say hey, you weren't a terrible person when I knew you in elementary school. That just felt very healing. And so I think the joy episode and then the bullying episode, they both felt very liberating in many ways for me. And so those are the two that stand out. But what about you, Leah? What are the moments that stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above, the hilarious ones, definitely the joy, and the bullying one, because I think for a lot of it, I was like, oh, like I can't really relate to being bullied, the way that you were, and like how vulnerable it was for you to share that. But like at the end, like I had like my own aha moment of, like why we're doing this, and why we share this, and kind of like what it is to be on the other side of that. And I remember like that was one of the first times I was like, oh, like it also felt like that very unscripted, like real talk for me. And then the other one that sticks out is our education one, or I guess we were talking about our professions. And then we went like on our soapboxes about the education system, like burn the whole thing down. And then Viren was like, yeah, like all over that one. And I think it's that. I think it's like whenever we like fully express ourselves, going back to like, okay, we hope that we're able to just share, like going beyond like what kind of Asians we are and just like speaking our minds, saying what it is, reclaiming our identity, and like to have these conversations where we're like 110% ourselves, firing off unpopular or what might seem like unpopular opinions, and just, yeah, like being able to support each other on that. It is definitely very like affirming and therapeutic. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you both. I feel like the joy episode that you mentioned and the bullying episode, I know for Ray, that was like a really hard subject for you. And so I just want to give you props. You're very vulnerable and courageous to, um, be so candid about your story. But yeah, I feel like in some of the episodes we got in this like flow state. Like I think I was moderating the joy episode and I had a list of questions, but then it just took a life of its own, and I was like,
Yes.
okay, I didn't really know what to do, but I'm like, all right, we're just drilling down on this, so I'm just gonna let it happen. And in a way, it is liberating. Like it was kind of for me as a moderator, I felt like I was losing control a little bit, but then I think after that, we were able to just have more breathing room around all our topics, and then even do some that kind of were like surprise topics on the day of recording. But I think what struck me is how obviously there are differences, but like the similarities in our experiences and our beliefs. Cause I feel like that's how the conversation flows, is that a lot of the time we just piggyback on each other. And so, yeah, it's been a very validating and healing space. And I think that's what we intended, when I went back and listened to that first episode. So, way to
You
go,
know,
us.
yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, like, when I was listening to our first episode back, something that I remember saying is, I'm on my journey towards becoming proud that I am Korean. But I feel like during the process of doing this podcast, I can't believe that I wasn't proud to be Korean before. And so, like, I've really owned the fact that that's so part of my identity. And I think, I really appreciate us doing this podcast to help me realize why, and have proof of like all the different reasons that have helped me understand, um, my relationship with the Asian American identity. So, yeah, that was another piece for me. And Leah, something you said in that episode that still sticks out is that you don't want people to feel like alone in talking about hard topics like this, and to just kind of be a space, a voice, be company where other people can be safe to explore these topics with us, or it privately, or whatever it was. That felt really like, I don't know, like it feels for me like the podcast did that for me. And so I hope that the podcast is doing that for other people. But yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, we have got some awesome feedback from some of our listeners that they were like, yeah, it does make them feel less alone in their struggles. And we've even had, topics come in through our listeners that we've
That's
covered.
right.
But yeah, I think it is a rare thing. I think we do get vulnerable and it's like this open space where we can reflect and explore. And yeah, I mean, tagging onto the Asian thing, like I remember, I think that was our second episode, where we were kind of exploring our Asian identity, but we were talking about all the pressure around it of not wanting to say the wrong thing, of feeling like we have to be this, like model minority or whatever, this great representative of our culture.
Yeah.
And I feel like through the process of this season that we've kind of found our voice a lot more, and we've let go a lot of those expectations. And so to me, it's very related to, like our Asian identity and us breaking out of that box.
Yeah. Yeah. To echo you both, I feel like we've come really far in both that. I guess like yeah, setting the intention and actually following through on it and not not giving an F about what we say at times, and really owning that side. Um I've also heard from friends who listen that they're like, yeah, listening to you all makes me want to like get my group of girlfriends together and also have these conversations. So definitely starting a ripple effect of sorts. And the other thing that I had this light bulb moment when I listened back to our first episode is that we're all 40 now.
Yeah, totally.
So we can't claim late 30s anymore. We've all crossed.
I'm
Did we
41
move
now.
up the box? We're in the other box.
I know Ray turned 41.
We're in our early 40s.
We're in our 40s now.
Our whole demographic has shifted. We're like on like, what do we say? I think Marin, you said we're like seniors, right? You're like, we're sophomores in our journey, but we're no longer in like the youthful phase of our youth. Anyway.
Well, people, at least I think they're surprised when they find out my age. Like sometimes I hang out with younger people and I'm like, thank you for being so shocked.
Oh my gosh. I am obsessed with this podcast called No Stupid Questions. It's with Angela Lee Duckworth and author of Grit, and Mike Mon. He works at Qualtrics. And one of the episodes they were talking about friendships. And they were like, you should have friends who are 20 years older than you and friends who are 20 years younger than you, because you kind of get more optimism from, I guess, like you get the energy and optimism from those who are younger than you, but you get the wisdom and the experiences and the feeling like seen and heard, from those who are older than you. Wait, I think the seen and heard part I squeezed in. I don't think that was part of it, but I was thinking of friendships recently, and I think the last thing I wanted to tag on to this question, Leah, that you asked is that I really understood what friendship is through this podcast. And I think I'm going to embarrass myself and by sharing this vulnerable piece. But there was a point in time where we had this meeting. It was all three of us, and we were having this meeting. And I don't know what was happening. There was a lot of things happening that day. And after the conversation was over, I realized like I had said some really offensive things. And some things that weren't true, some things that were kind of just mean, and some things that just I wasn't considering other people. And after that conversation, like I was totally oblivious to that. But then after having a conversation about what happened, I was like, oh my gosh, like I saw all of those blind spots. And the fact that you guys were both like cared about me enough to bring it up in like such a kind way, and still give me the benefit of the doubt. I was like, nobody has ever done that for me. And I've never had a conversation where I was in the wrong and we remained friends afterwards. Like that had never happened to me. I just never had a really good model of what good friendship was. And like through like therapy and talking about that experience, I realized, oh, this is what friends do. Like it's not perfect, but if there's an issue, you guys talk about it and you repair. And that was kind of also what helped me realize how to do that in parenting, because we can only help each other as much as, or help others as much as we can help ourselves. And I wasn't doing that with my daughter because I didn't know how to do that in my own relationships. So yeah, so I really have learned what it means to share and be in a friendship, and what it means to take care of a friendship.
Aw.
And that, so thanks, guys.
Oh, I'm really glad you brought that up because I feel like that's just a testament to the kind of safe space that we created with each other. Because I don't think, all friendships can withstand that. It's like you have to have a strong foundation where
Mm,
if you really care about each other and you're bringing something up, that they're going to listen, and then you can have a conversation, and and you don't want to just have to hide that. And it all goes back to like that original point about like as Asian women, we feel like we always have to have this great face and be PC, and we can never cause conflict, we can never cause
yeah.
inconvenience. But I think, yeah, this podcast has been a stepping stone in that way for me too, to be able to speak out more, stand up for myself. And I think just with the three of us kind of validating each other's feelings and experiences, it gives a little bit more power, for me, to my own voice and my own opinions about things, and not to gaslight myself about certain things. So it's been
Yeah.
great. And I'm not even in therapy right now. So this podcast is probably really coming in clutch for me.
Oh, I know. Like the topics I reflect on, like the grief episode and um
Mm,
and the other side of the spectrum talking about our ideal partners and how all our
oh yeah.
husbands are like really great. But like, it took a bit to get there. Yeah, I think it's a lot of that, like just the reaffirming of, yeah, like when things didn't go so well, and then when things, like are fun and more intentional, and we're able to share all of that together. Yeah, like I don't have too many friends like I'm able to like, yeah, share like all the sad parts with, in addition to all the happy parts. So this is
Mm-hmm.
definitely, yeah, a fun space. And not to mention, so this is like off the podcast, but we also have conversations in our Instagram chats of just like really
Yeah.
random things. Like they might start off as ideas for new topics or venting
Right.
sessions, but I think that's just, yeah, a testament that like it's not just this podcast, we do talk to each other outside of this.
It's not just all for the show and for
Yeah.
content.
That's true.
Like, follow,
Yeah.
subscribe. Just kidding. Uh,
I had a rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. One question popped into my head about like, what do you feel is there any change like from the you that showed up on the first day of doing this podcast and now the last episode of season 1?
Yeah, that was a question I wanted to ask.
Ooh, we're reading each other's
Yeah.
minds.
I know. It kind of reminds me of the Joy episode where we're just kind of like, climbing
Mm-hmm.
off of each other's thoughts. And but I wanted to say, like, I definitely feel like more of a secure human being um in since the first episode. And I want to say, like, when I listened back to that first episode, I totally understand what Leah meant. Like, we just felt like so naive. I know she meant that in jest, but there was a kind of like I don't know what the word is, but there was like a rose-colored goggles type of feel, I think. But then I think throughout our conversations and throughout our like bonding and developing this friendship and talking deep about our thoughts, I have become confident that it doesn't matter if I say the wrong thing, or it doesn't matter if I don't say it completely, or if I'm not thorough in what my thoughts are. I can always come back to it later and finish that thought later. So I don't feel this much of a hurriedness or like a pressure to say everything I need to say or everything I know about that topic in the moment, because hopefully I get another opportunity to share a little bit more about that later. But I realize that that's kind of how most people live their lives. They don't feel pressured or hurried to say the perfect thing in the moment. They can say the wrong thing and correct later, or complete it later as time goes on. And that has also given me a lot of rest to my OCD a little bit, and also my imposter syndrome and my perfectionism. And that has also really helped me understand. And that's what I mean by I feel a little bit more of as a secure human being. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it has to do with the strength of our continuing friendship, that we can overcome difficult things. We can have difficult conversations. We can bounce back after difficult things have happened. So I don't know. I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's
No,
what's
that's, I
come up for
mean,
me.
one thing I noticed, Ray, like when I listened to some of the episodes, is you would always be like, you try to like deflect the question to the other person. So it totally tracks because what you're saying, and I've known you for a long time, so I know that about you, but just that you feel that you have to say the perfect things and you have to
Yeah.
say everything. And like, I think we've heard that over time, but then maybe have seen the evolution of that. So yeah, that's really awesome. And like to your point about that pressure, I mean, I think it is related to the pressures of being an Asian woman. I think there's a lot of men and like white males that feel free to take their time, take up the space in the room, but that hasn't been our experience. Growing up, we had to really like grow into the people that we are now. And it's taken like our 40s to really be able to take up space. But it's also because we've created this safe space amongst each other. Because if we were in like a boardroom or somewhere else, that wasn't as much of a safe space, then we have to do some code switching. It's different. So I just want to validate your point about that, that I think it is, I definitely have experienced that too.
Yeah. What about you guys? What has changed for, yeah.
What?
How have you changed since the first episode?
I had
It doesn't have to be big either.
yeah,
It
I
could
know.
just be like how you're feeling or yeah.
I had an aha moment and I lost it. I don't know what it was. But I remember, well, this is more recent. So like, yeah, in the very beginning I remember like, oh, like right now I find peace, and then I think my future word or future sentiment was like, I'm really excited about the future. But let me tell you, the last few weeks before I turned 40, I was very stressed out and like having a midlife crisis. And I was like, oh no, I haven't done all the things I wanted to do. And I saw myself putting that same pressure again that we tend to do as Asian women, where we're like, I haven't accomplished enough. Like, what is my worth? Like I am not valuable unless I'm able to do X, Y, and Z before whatever. But yeah, through like some coaching training I did, through our like podcast conversations, and you all like validating like I need to do what I want to do to celebrate my birthday and all this stuff. I finally come to, I guess, terms. Yeah, one with turning 40, and the way, and well, you all know by now I'm like a Swiftie, so like I call it like my creative expression era. So I definitely want to be even more of myself, and I think it's more like I want to approach this next decade with like wonder and awe, and like, ooh, it'll be interesting to see how things unfold, instead of kind of this like, yeah, I guess this hustle or pressure mentality of, yeah, trying to be perfect and trying to plan out all the things and be like, it's not going to happen unless I do, like 5 things by this month. And yeah, I think I was starting to break under that pressure. And definitely, I think, yeah, like, I don't know, milestone birthdays and just like these things, you think should happen. Like I felt that going again. But yeah, it's weird because, yeah, it's just like this trajectory over like, what? Not even like, yeah, beginning of this year to like now. It really hasn't even been a year yet. But once again, it's like this roller coaster of, I feel at peace, and like, no, I don't. And then like, okay, I'm back. So, yeah. What about you, Mary?
Yeah, well, I listened to this podcast called Ghost of a Podcast. As the listeners know, I'm into astrology, and so it's an astrology podcast. And she does like one-on-one readings. So she had someone on who I think was maybe in their 50s, but she mentioned something about from ages 0 to 40, you're kind of driven by the energy that you come into the world with. Like you come in, but then from 40 onwards, you have to generate your own energy.
No,
I don't know like why exactly. I mean, but it made me think of that. It's like 40 is somewhat like, for me, it's felt like a turning point of trying to let go of certain things and looking ahead to like the future decades, and just being way more. There's that book like called Essentialism, and I'm just way more in that mindset because I think you're just more aware of your mortality, limitations of time, energy, everything else. And so it does it helps you to get more focused, of like, what is going to create meaning in my life? Like, what is my obituary going to say? Like all these things, we've all had really hard things happen to us. And I think that's a testament to how important this podcast has been for us, is that we've all been having a bunch of stuff going on outside of it, but we've still made this commitment to each other to show up, and I've never regretted that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's been for me like an exercise. Yeah, I think that first episode we were saying all the great things, like, yeah, these are all our intentions and it's all positive, but then I think slowly with every episode it started creeping in of like, okay, when one of us would be a little bit more bold and authentic, then it would kind of open it up for another person to do that, right? And we could just all hold that space. And so it's felt very organic in that way, because I think that's how life goes. It's like when you're in relationships or you're meeting new people, you're making friends. I mean, you have to test the waters to see if you can trust, right? I mean, Ray, you wouldn't go out and like tell that story of your childhood trauma, just anybody. It's like, I think we had to earn your trust, and create that safety. So yeah, I think that's invaluable. And I think friendships are really beautiful, and they just don't get as much, publicity like we talked about early on in the podcast. You see a lot of like the romantic relationships, and then we live in a hyper individualistic society where it's all about like yourself too. But as a woman, and now like in our 40s, like I just feel like friendships are what get you through life for real. I mean, it helps to have a good partner, you know what I mean?
But they can't be everything.
Like, yeah, like friendships are everything, and they're so kind of like underrated, I think. So I'm glad we're putting it out there. Like, treasure your friendships, make time. It's worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I could see us still doing this podcast in our 60s or 80s. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like that much effort, you know, and like the benefits of, yeah, like just talking to each other outweigh like any whatever, you know, like things that could get in the way of it. So, yeah.
I think we were smart in how we planned it because we kind of already knew like we're all busy. And I know Ray like does a ton of work with the editing and she has a lot on her plate, but like I think we did it in a way where we never wanted it to feel like a chore.
Yes. We set that
And
intention. Yeah, very early on.
and we didn't want it to feel like work, even though I'm sure it does at certain moments, but just to take the pressure off and to know, you know, we can pivot, we can change the schedule, whatever it is, to accommodate all of us. But we all just have to be honest about how we're feeling and what our bandwidth is and all of that, which has been a journey. Yeah.
That has also been a really, really challenge. So Leo, and you're like, yeah, it doesn't take that much effort. I'm like, oh, wait, what?
And you are doing a lot of podcasts, right? Yes. Like you have a lot going on.
Yeah. And so that's something that I also really appreciate about our friendship and also this podcast is that, and it also didn't occur to me, but, you know, it was like, I was putting so much pressure on myself to keep this podcast in line or to prioritize this podcast along with everything else in my life. And I have a tendency to do that. Like, I don't know if this is a Libra thing, but I want everything to kind of have the same priority if I'm putting effort and time into it. And like it took me a long time to understand, oh, actually this thing shouldn't have higher priority than me being a mom, or this other thing shouldn't have more priority than. And so it took me a long time to understand that I don't have to prioritize everything equally. And so one thing that I've really benefited from having certain conversations with you off the record is that, you know, we can adjust accordingly because this is not a job. This is something that we're doing because we want to. And so that's another thing that I learned as a person is what is the difference between doing something as a job and doing something as a hobby. And one is like sustenance and like what has to kind of be the foundation for your survival. And the other thing is kind of doing what you would like and following your curiosity and pursuing what brings you joy. And you shouldn't put equal, you don't need to put equal, not necessarily effort, but not equal pressure for both of these things or these two different things. So that's, yeah, something also that I learned. Yeah, I've learned a lot from doing this podcast about myself and how I should belong and live in this world. It's almost like I was born 21 episodes ago.
That's the energy you're creating for yourself.
That's a good review. Write that on Apple Podcasts.
I'm so I have a different perspective, Ray, on like job and hobbies and all of that stuff. And it took me a while to get here, but I see it differently. I do think that an ideal job should be something you enjoy and would do it whether or not you're getting paid for it, right? Like maybe it's idealistic, but I feel, I guess, one in terms of like energy and where your time spent is like, yes, a Libra thing. Like I don't look at like a day, but maybe like more like a week level or what things are going on family wise that I need to show up for, right? Like my son's soccer game or this, whatever, right? And then at work, you know, what projects are going on? Am I running this meeting? You know, how do I want to show up for it? And then like personal projects, right? Like this podcast and some of my art stuff and coaching. And I think it's more how do I feel congruent or like good about how I'm investing in each one of those in a way where it feels like, yeah, I'm not burning out And I understand what good enough for me is. And it's not about 100% perfection, because that's impossible, especially after kids, especially like knowing that time is limited. We need more sleep these days, right? And like perimenopause, all the things. Yeah, so that's why I'm like, oh, like it shouldn't, yeah, like jobs should not be seen as like icky. Yeah, it's for my survival. But how do you, yeah, get what you need out of all these parts of your life where I feel like everything should be at least life giving, at least to the point where not everything's depleting you. So I don't know, but I wanted to call that out because here we are. I don't know how we got here, but
Yeah, I mean, I think when it's like a personal project like this is for us, and it's very much like about us and our experiences, like it has just been very much intertwined with our lives and our certain habits, or, it all comes into this, right? And I mean, I can get where you're coming from, Ray. Like, it's just those expectations, like that you would have, of yourself at work, or it's just like, and like as moms, it's just there's like I think it was that essentialism book, but they were just like, yeah, as a CEO or someone who's just managing a lot of different things, it's really not about crossing off all your to-dos on the list. It's about prioritizing what belongs in the top 3 spots. And that's like a dynamic process that continually, has to change. And I think even when my life was like crazy and I did have to cancel a few times because of emergencies, but I felt like every time we came to record, it was a life-giving experience. And I know some of the stuff outside of it is not as life-giving, but that's where we can have open and honest conversations, about what's going to work. And like even Leah and I kind of swapped roles because she was doing the copywriting and I was doing more of the social media stuff, and then we swapped, and it's like, oh, and it kind of gave me new energy, because I was like kind of burning out to keep up with it. So just knowing, yeah, like nothing is static and we're doing this to ourselves. So it's almost like a little microcosm of like how we are in the world, where we can see it, and then because we get vulnerable, we actually like talk about it, and so we can kind of see our own patterns and like, okay, I see when I'm doing this, but I actually don't have to do this. Like in this case, maybe there's some cases where you do, but yeah, it's been very gratifying that way.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean, Marin, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the film school grad. Like, okay, I have to do all the editing stuff. I have to do all the video stuff. And then I was like, oh, there's so much because it's like so much time. And I was like really, really like, like treading mud, I guess. And then Leo was like, I can take on the reels. I was like, really? Thank
well,
you.
AI's taken over, so as long as the quality is okay, I mean, make the robots do it. But Ray, it sounds like one of my takeaways I'm hearing is maybe we do need another conversation reset to make sure this doesn't feel like you're burning out or efforting.
I mean, that's what we're going to do right after this call.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We can hash it out. I mean, and that's like something that's kind of uncomfortable, I think, like as an Asian woman, to actually speak up about your needs.
Yeah.
And your limitations, because in the past, I would never do that. I would like keep all my balls in the air no matter what was going on in my life.
Exactly.
I would, and that's kind of expectation, but that's the expectation we put on ourselves. And then part of it too could be like the model minority thing, that people just expecting us to always have it together. But I think that's the beauty of what we're showing on this podcast is like all the messy parts too, like we have meltdowns, we have off days and all of that. And and it's all those different parts of us that make us who we are. So I think that's been my journey, is like I also, like Ray, struggled with perfectionism in the past. So I would feel like I had to have this perfectly curated image, and it's just having that freedom to be a lot of different things at once. And some of the things are even like contradictions in themselves. And I don't have to have all the answers. Like to your point of like, oh, we always have to say something that's super wise and going to resonate or not offend anyone. I am to the point now where it's like, I'm just going to speak what I feel, but then I'm also happy to be like, if you don't agree with me, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's just taken me a lot of time to get here, or to be like, oh, maybe I'm wrong, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we're at a beautiful age, and like these conversations, it kind of reaffirms that for me too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, there's this thing uh at the beginning of our podcast, this lesson still hadn't dawned on me, but um I or maybe it had, but I just was in denial. But I realized through my other podcast, Homeroom, that I was living my life in fear of making a mistake. And so I don't know how to explain it other than now, as I look back on it, I've given myself the permission to learn things the hard way. So if there's some like unseen consequence that happens because of me being authentic or me being honest, I am going to learn it by making that mistake. Because and instead of in fear, because I think my amygdala, if it's possible, just does not have any more capacity to live in fear. Like,
Oh, good. You burnt it out.
I did.
Just like those upper lip hairs.
I mean, like, exactly. Like, I don't think it's possible for the amygdala to like be burnt out, because I think it grows, right? Like, it's the fear like brain organ thing. But yeah, it's just like, look, if you use me anymore, like, you are going to die. Like, I'm going to overtake your brain and you're going to
That's
die.
your 41-year-old self. Yes, your amygdala's
Exactly.
like, no, 40 years of living in fear is enough.
I mean, maybe you're just tired of it too.
Yeah.
You're just tired of living that way.
You're over it.
And like, I have a question for Ray, because like, I know in the past you were more comfortable behind the camera.
Yes.
And I mean, I know you've been doing a lot of work, like you're in front of the camera a lot more, but I'm curious, like, how has that experience been for you? Because I think like it's been enlightening, like I think for all of us to be able to hear ourselves and everything. But I know that you battle a lot of kind of like confidence issues, and you would be like, oh, I don't even know if that made sense, but you like said something super
really profound,
like wise, and then also based in research, like
with your sources. And
exactly. So like, I'm wondering how that experience has been like for you, because I know you question yourself a lot, but then has hearing yourself back kind of, I don't know, helped heal that in any way? Or you're editing it too, which I know is a different experience.
Yeah.
We don't have, we're not editing ourselves.
So that's a really good question, and thank you for asking this, because I've also been on a personal journey of trying to be more comfortable being on screen. And so I have this other series that I haven't been sharing it, but I still do, which is just like 5 to 10 minutes of just me talking into the camera every single day. And like just being comfortable with it. Because yes, I do overthink and I do question myself a lot. And so I think my journey of self-esteem, like, I generally have low self-esteem, very, very low, very, very low self-esteem. But I think it's gotten a lot higher, but I think still below average. But I think I am, I don't care about making those mistakes anymore. So if I do sound a little stupid, because I sound stupid very often, but I'm kind of like, if they're still dealing with me and they haven't cut me off, like, or if they haven't just stopped listening to me, like, I should still keep going and still like life give to what I'm saying. Because nobody wants to hear somebody, because I think in general, most people see themselves as less confident. They recognize or relate to the part of themselves that have lower self-esteem. So they might present a different way, but they always find resonance with people who say they have low self-esteem. So I'm realizing, okay, I need to, if I feel like I'm not confident, then I have to also now tell myself, other people are probably not feeling confident. So what can I do to give myself like a pep talk or like this little energy giving myself so that I can transfer to other people? And having been like a teacher for more than 15 years, like that's something that I really enjoy doing, which is like finding the people who don't feel confident and giving them the confidence, either by giving them a compliment or giving them the opportunity to shine in something that I know that they're going to shine in. So I'm trying to do that for myself. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question the way that you asked it, but in general, I feel a lot better because I now have those strategies in place where I recognize, oh, if I'm feeling not confident or have low self-esteem or am overthinking, find a way, like find one thing about myself that I am good at and try to lead with that. So it's these strategies that have helped. And, this space and speaking with you guys has really also helped me get out of that. But yeah, I'm just wondering, like, as we like go on to the next year, I know, Marin, you had like a question that you wanted to ask all of us, or have like this exercise that you wanted to end this episode with. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I was inspired by another podcast where they actually kind of like spoke a letter or like wishes for their next season self. So this is the ending of our first season of Your Asian Besties. And it's something maybe we can return to at the end of the second season. So if there's any words you'd like to tell your season 2 Ray and Leah yourselves, yeah, what would it be? And it can be like always, it doesn't have to be like so grandiose. It can,
right.
Leah,
what about you?
First, I want to call out Ray because you just totally changed the subject. I was going to say, like, had you not told us and reminded us that being on camera is, like, really difficult for you, I would never have known that. Like, you present yourself so well and so articulate and, like, yeah, like, anyway. So, yeah, sorry.
I think that's why I was curious, like, if she's seen it yet. Yeah, because it's like a disconnect. It was even like on our beauty episode. You're so hard on yourself. I mean, I know we all can be.
We're our worst critics, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I think you would just say things and I'm like, that's so not the reality.
No, you don't say stupid things and
yeah, if anything, you're the most well-researched out of the three of us. Yeah. And I will say that I have to give you credit that I think that my husband says it where he'll be listening sometimes and be like, Ray brings in that Scorpio vibe sometimes and it's good, because I think you can take the conversations to another level because you're honest about your insecurities and like the darker sides or the not so collected sides. And then it takes our conversation to more, like deeper levels. Yeah. And so I think it really is like a gift in terms of this podcast. And that's the hardest stuff. I mean, it's easy to be honest about like stuff we're proud of or like already good at, but it's much harder to talk about like with that bullying episode. Like that's probably one of the hardest things to do is to like have a conversation like that. And like for me with the grief episode, I think that was like my bullying episode. But I wasn't even ready to tackle that until later. I kept telling you guys, oh, let's wait a little while and I'll let you know when I'm ready. So, yeah.
For sure.
That was a supernatural episode for me.
We've all faced our fears.
But let's go back to your question, Ray. I just want to make sure we addressed that.
Thank you.
You'll always know when something's happening when she brings this paper out.
Yeah. I was like, Ray, no, we didn't get to dive deep into what you just said. We're going to face it together.
I know. Well, so part of it is I'm kind of like, I realize like I'm looking at the minutes and I'm like, oh, I just been
we started late
for 3 minutes. And so it's like,
No, we have
And
time.
so I'm like, oh, I need to stop talking. So how do I deflect, or how do I like change the
Don't. Yeah, don't limit
She's
yourself.
her line for deflecting is I was like, so Leah.
All of a sudden, Marion, you have this question you want to ask us. I was like, wait, you just said something really profound, and we need to acknowledge it first. Anyway, so let's continue. Yeah, Marion, do you want to answer first?
I want Ray to answer first.
Okay, you need to.
You can answer with the paper over your face. It's okay. Yes. We just have to catch your voice.
As long as we can hear you.
It's a podcast.
Oh my gosh, you guys have like, I'm like drenched. I'm like sweating so much. I think the thing that I want to tell myself for season 2, or as we go into the next season, is kind of this same energy of like believing in yourself and being confident, and kind of projecting that same lesson that it's okay not to say the perfect thing, but if you kind of focus on trying to say the perfect thing, or saying the thing that you feel like you need to say, like, you're gonna choke, and the reason is because you're giving yourself so much pressure, that you're not giving yourself space to explore and go outside of your comfort zone. So you're like, you're kind of like closing yourself off from connection. Whereas if you trust that, oh, it'll come back to me, or I don't have to say this perfect thing, but maybe eventually I'll get back to it. Or maybe if I don't have the perfect thing to say, like, can I set this up as a question and give it to other people so that they can either help me or get us back on track or get us on a better track. And so realizing that you don't have to always have the right answer. So just to give it away, or just to expand your space. And I want to say something that one of my professors said to me in grad school, and I'm not really, I'm kind of ashamed of this, because I was a long time a teacher before this had happened. But, and also in college and high school, like, I was selectively mute. Like, I would never volunteer and never talk. I was always the one who didn't want to chat or say anything or express myself. And so, but in grad school, I was like, I'm going to change this. Like, I'm going to be that student I always wanted to be. And it got to the point where I was hijacking every conversation. And so one of my professors was like, at the end of one class, she was like, you know, like, I can't exactly remember, and maybe if I try to reflect on it more later, I'll remember, but she got to the point where she was like, you know, I noticed that you enjoy speaking, which is great. Like, we love that you're participating in all of that, but is there a way where you don't have to speak all the time? You know, she didn't say it this way. She led me to this. And eventually we got to this place of, oh, you know, you could also just ask questions. Like, you don't have to share all these answers. Like, you could just ask the question to somebody else. And that's how you can still participate without hijacking the conversation. And I was like, well, yeah, duh, because this is what I do in my classes. Like, I ask questions to my students so they can answer and encourage that. Why didn't I think to do that? And so I guess the advice that I'd like to give my future self is, if you feel like you are hijacking a conversation or hogging something, or feel like you have to say something perfectly or thoroughly, just ask a question instead and see where it goes, because maybe eventually it'll come back to you.
Well, I don't think you'd ever hijack here. So if you're saying specifically about this podcast,
you ask questions all the time to deflect.
Yes. So as long as we're catching the question as authentic and not a deflection mechanism, That's what I envision for the next season. Just kidding.
I mean, my comment on that is that, like, for me, I think that was with my emotional expression because I grew up like repressing all my emotions because I didn't have a model for it. And so when I started expressing, like, especially more of the quote unquote negative emotions, like my anger, resentment, I kind of went too much, like, quote unquote, you know what I'm saying? But I feel like it's just because you've never done it before. It's like if you're holding everything in, whether that's your voice, your emotions for so long, then it's like bursting at the seams. And then once you do it, it may be a lot, but then over time, the more you do it, it's like you will find that calibration of like somewhere in the middle. But it's totally understandable for someone like that didn't talk in class for a really long time, and then you finally do, that you're going to have a lot to say. And you're probably also pushing yourself to do it. You know what I mean? So like when I hear that, it just seems like a natural step in growth, you know? So, yeah. See,
can I say, what about you guys now?
Mary's going to say the word penis like 20 times next season. I'm kidding.
Yeah, it sounded so like natural when I said it, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll just like throw it in. I'll throw it in conversation. Season 2, you'll hear it. You have to let me know how many times I say it.
Take a shot. It'll be our new drinking game next season.
Yeah. You want to go, Leah?
You go first. You can go.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think mine would be inspired by Ray, actually. Aww. Where I've talked a lot about how, I dealt with a lot of perfectionism and feeling like, oh, I have to kind of like present, especially in a public setting, like, oh, I have to present my best self. So in terms of being on the camera, like in the past, I probably would have done my makeup and had a setup and been overly prepared and all that stuff. And it's like we're talking about, like, I just don't have the time to do that right now, or maybe I just don't authentically feel like it. And so I think I would tell myself that there is a lot of beauty, and sometimes the most powerful connections do come from the unfiltered conversations and the hard moments in life. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. Because I think I do have that impulse that like, oh, I have to, hide it, or I have to like package it in such a way of like, even if I'm going through a hard time, I have to see the silver lining or whatever, but I'm really trying to take that pressure off. And I think this podcast has taught me that, just being real about fears, about what's hard, about what you're struggling with, like that is really the powerful stuff. Nobody really wants to hear how you have all your shit together. Like, it's just so annoying. Like, and so just telling the truth. And so I would just tell my season 2 self to just be authentic about what I'm going through, and that there's no shame in struggling, sometimes. So,
yeah. Good job, both of you. You both are inspirations.
And Leah?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we talk about the deep stuff because I naturally gravitate towards like positive, happy feelings. So that's where the therapy comes in, right? Like I need to sit with like more of the sad stuff and the anger stuff more. But that's not what I was gonna say for next season. Like I don't care if we stay in like happy space. But there was an intention, like when we talked about the first episode for this season, that I think we could do more of next season. And what I'd like for us to do, and I think this is a personal challenge to myself too, is to really build out the community and like seek more opportunities for that. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think personally it's something I've been craving more of, even like creating local meetups or, like getting more like-minded people together, or, maybe we'll all like get to be in the same part of the world some point and do this live. But I think, because, well, for me personally, I work remotely, right? Like we all like kind of, like work at home, and like friendship is one thing. Like it's great we can do this virtually, but there is like something like it would be fun to do stuff together. Like I want to do a craft together, or I don't know, some kind of like bonding experience. And I guess, yeah, like kind of when I think like, what is that I'm longing for? Or like, what could we try next season? I think it's finding more ways to be even more like of ourselves, live, less polished. I don't know what that looks like, but yeah.
Yeah, I think because I've heard from some people in our community, and this is something we'll probably talk about right after we get off this call, is like maybe doing like a bestie, like opening up the besties chat, like doing a monthly or quarterly, just
Yeah.
like open Zoom, where we can just hang out, or maybe we could do book club, or we could do a crafting time,
Book
or
club.
whatever it
Yes.
is.
Book club.
Yeah. So I've definitely heard like the need for it, and I've been asked. So I think, yeah, we'll
specifically.
definitely.
Okay, good. I'm
Yeah,
asking
so
you too.
yeah, so it'll be on the slate for sure for season 2, and just leaning more into the unfilteredness and being able to actually interact, I think, with our listeners.
Yeah. And I want to do it in a way, once again, setting the intention is like to not burn out. Because a few years ago, I was very involved in volunteering and burnt myself out. And I think that's where this resistance is of like, oh no, what am I getting myself into? But I mean, knowing how we all work together and how we're very mindful of like not getting to that point or trying to pivot when we catch ourselves at that point. Like, yeah, I feel like, yeah, we'll be our unfiltered, unscripted selves, even in these sessions. No additional editing needed, right? Or anything like that. But yeah, I would look forward to this. Yes. And yeah, anyone out there listening, let us know if you have ideas for what you would like to see in these, yeah, community bestie chat / doing stuff together and being together sessions. Cool. And
Awesome.
yeah, so on that note, let's also end on a final word or intention to wrap up this season and the rest of this year. Marion, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'd say authenticity and connection. So maybe authentic connections.
Yeah.
I was going to say connection. So, yeah.
There you go.
So I was going to say social connection. But yeah, and also something about like not legacy, but like passing off the torch type thing. I'll come up with a word later. I'll just stick with social connection for now. What about you, Leah?
Community. Is that like connection?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we're all aligned. That's great.
Yes.
Love it. So, yeah, that's a sneak peek of what is in store for season 2. And yeah, if you haven't already, follow us at Your Asian Besties on social media and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Oh my gosh, you guys put me on the spot like
Of course
7 times.
I don't think you ever brought a paper out until this episode.
Oh, I know. I had to like fan myself, but
I love your vulnerability, Ray.
thank
It makes,
you. I can't
it
help
makes for a really great conversation.